So okay, so I can see you. I hope you can see me.
You bet.
There are actually only a couple of texts that we have to deal with, but I want to start with because and they all come from the book of Hebrews, or the letter to the Hebrews, which is of course one of the books of the Christian scripture that was originally attributed to Paul. But even Bible scholars today have no idea who really wrote this, and it was actually controversial as to whether it was going to be included in the Christian scripture. But let's start with priesthood. So, how does someone become a priest? How does someone become a Kohen?
Born.
My father was a Kohen. My grandfather was a Kohen. Now I am a Kohen.
That's right, right? A very old joke about the fellow who comes to the rabbi and says, "I need you to make me a Kohen." And the rabbi says, "You know, you can't do that." He says, "Listen, Rabbi, this would be worth a very large donation to your building fund." The rabbi thinks about it, he could really use this large donation, and he gives him a formula. You go down to the river and you dunk in the river and you turn around 3 times, and then you jump up and down. And when you come back, you're a Kohen. So he comes back to the rabbi. He has this donation that he made, and he says, "I'm so happy that you've made me a Kohen, because after all, my father was a Kohen, and my grandfather was a Kohen, and my great grandfather was a Kohen." Right? It's a very, very old joke, but actually, the Kahuna does not, which goes back to the Levites, and in particular to Moses' brother Aaron, and all Kohanim by tradition are descendants of Aaron. But as far as the book of Numbers is concerned, the original priesthood was not part of was not a descendants of the Levites, but was, anybody know?
Descendants of Abraham.
All firstborn. All firstborn were of the children of Israel were considered chosen by God, and it's after the golden calf that God decides. I could read you the passage, but God decides, I'm not going to. I've changed who the religious leadership will be, and from now on it will be from the tribe of Levi, and it becomes and as a matter of fact, how many of you have ever been to a Pidyon HaBen? How many have been to a Pidyon? Well, what in heaven's name is a Pidyon HaBen?
You ransomed the child from the Kohen.
So that's right. So, but how did that come about? It appears from what's described in the book of Numbers that there were approximately the same number of firstborn as there were members of the tribe of Levi. And so they did, in order to transfer that leadership, there was a 1-for-1 transfer from firstborns to members of the entire tribe of Levi, except that there were 273 more firstborns than there were members of the tribe of Levi. So those 273 could not transfer their obligation to the tribe of Levi. So ever since, for the last several thousand years, we have been transferring in a ceremony called Pidyon HaBen, the obligation of the firstborn. We did that with our son Ari, to a Kohen. So in that ceremony, if you've ever been to it, usually the parents or the father of the child hands the Kohen 5 silver coins, As a matter of fact, I have a set of coins in my office that were issued by the Israeli government exactly for this purpose. Hands the Kohen the 5 coins and the Kohen holds the coins over the child. We actually have a photograph. Holds the coins over the child and say, "This in exchange for this." In other words, the 5 coins in exchange for your obligation. And so that's what a Pidyon Haben is all about. Now, the reason I mention that is because the issue of priesthood becomes an important issue in our chapter, and especially when we get to Malki Tzedek. So the question is, if I try to do this here, to lower this, I'm going to get rid of this. I want to go to here. Highlight that. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to try. And if I fail, I fail. I'm going to do screen share. And you can't see that, can you? Darn. Share.
Yep.
Now you can see it.
Yeah,
Right?
I can see it, but I can't read it.
Okay. So this is Genesis 14.
Mhm.
Okay, you can't read it?
Yeah.
No,
If I make it bigger, it becomes too big.
No, it's fine.
I can actually make it bigger.
That's good.
It's great.
Okay,
Whoa,
Now
No,
I'm-
it's too big.
nope.
now I made it bigger, but can I move it? But
No,
I can't move it. So
It's
I'm gonna,
fine before.
okay. So in any event, this is a very strange chapter, but it's an important chapter for our author and for Christian theology. This chapter is the only chapter of Genesis in which Abraham gets involved in international relations. Aside from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, here he goes to battle. This is the description, chapter 14 is this description of a battle that takes place of 5 kings against 4 kings. The leader of the kings that wins is a guy named Hadad LaOmer. Choder LaOmer, which you might see if you have good eyes, is in verse.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see my cursor?
Mhm.
I have a cursor that I'm moving. Can you see it?
Mhm.
Okay. So they go to battle. Abraham then gets involved because his nephew, his nephew Lot, somehow is captured. So if you look, I'm here in verse 13, and it says, a fugitive brought news to Abraham the Hebrew, who was dwelling in the terebinths of Mamre, the Amorite, kinsman of Eshcol and Amer, these being Abraham's allies. When Abraham heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he mustered his retainers, born into his household, numbering 318, that's quite a bit. So he's got his own army, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Now, Dan is in the north of Israel. Some of the other descriptions of places are actually in the south, but at night, he and his servants deployed against them and defeated them, and he pursued them as far as Hobah, which is in the north of Damascus. He brought back all the possessions. He also brought back his kinsman Lot and his possessions and the women and the rest of the people. Now, here comes the important part. When he returned from defeating Chador LaOmer and the kings with him, the king of Sodom, right? Sodom is by tradition near the Dead Sea in the south, came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh. which is the Valley of the Kings. Okay, everybody with me?
Mhm.
King of Sodom came out to meet him. Interjection. And the king Melchizedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of the Most High, of El Elyon. He blessed him, saying, "Blessed be Abraham of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And he blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your foes from your hand." And Abraham gave him, you see Abraham's in parentheses, because it doesn't say in the text Abraham, it just says he. And we're going to go with Abraham. Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. He gave him a tithe. When the king of Sodom then the king of Sodom said to Abraham, "Give me the persons and take the possessions for yourself." But Abraham said to the king of Sodom, "I swear to the Lord God of Most High, El Elyon, creator of heaven and earth, I will not take so much as a thread or a sandal strap of what is yours. You shall not say, 'It is I who made Abraham rich.' For me, nothing but what my servants have used up. As for the share of the men who went with me, Amer, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share." So, well, the important part is this interjection of Melchizedek. Right. First, verse 17 talks about the king of Sodom. Verse 21, we get back to the king of Sodom. So there's somehow in verses 18, 19, and 20, this interjection. Who is this guy? What is he all about? Well, I got to tell you, I've never given a sermon about, I've never given a talk on Saturday morning about Melchizedek, because in Jewish tradition, no one has any idea who he is or what he is. But in the, as the author points out, in the book of the epistle to the Hebrews, exactly who that book is addressed to is a matter of debate as well. This guy becomes very important. So why is he important? He's, first of all, he's a king. He's also seems to be a priest. And he addresses, and King Melchizedek of Sodom brought out bread and wine, later on connected with the Eucharist. He was a priest of God Most High. Well, so there are some, I've heard one interpretation, not from our text, that says he is one of the original monotheists, right? Adam and Eve were monotheists. Noah was a monotheist. Somehow monotheism disappears, and it gets renewed with Abraham. Well, according to the tradition of some, Melchizedek was an original monotheist. There evidently were some around. He was a king and a priest. First of all, he is the king of Salem. Salem is in Hebrew is Shalem, which is very close to Shalom, of course. All it is the change of some of vowels. So what is Salem? Well, many people say Salem is, and we have other connections, Salem is a reference to Jerusalem. He is king of Salem, king of Jerusalem, but he's also king of Shalom. He is the king or prince of peace. You ever heard of that before? The Prince of Peace?
Mhm.
So this is where it all comes from. Who is Melchizedek? First of all, he comes out with wine, and then he blesses, as a priest would. He blesses Abraham, blesses Abraham, and blesses God. Blessed be Abraham of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand. So according to the book of Hebrews, Malki Tzedek is eternal. We don't know about his parentage. We don't know about any descendants. Malki Tzedek is Jesus. So Malki Tzedek, somehow, because he blesses Abraham, he is superior to Abraham. And Abraham actually gives him, according to that last line, Abraham gave him a tithe, a tenth of everything. So somehow Abraham is connected to him, and that this priesthood is superior to the Hebrew priesthood. You know, everybody with me? You got all of that? All that comes from these three verses. That Malki Tzedek, which means is a name, but as we'll see in a little bit, is also the can be translated as a righteous king. Right? Melech is king, Tzedek is righteous. So Malki Tzedek is in this case clearly a name, but when it comes up in Psalm 110, we're not sure if it's a name or not. But certainly in the epistle to the Hebrews, it is clearly a name. And so anybody have any questions about?
Are you using
about
the
this?
JPS translation?
You have to speak up because I can't see any hands.
Are you using
Yep.
the JPS translation?
This is the JPS translation. Yes, this is our translation.
The 62.
Yes, this is JPS translation. It's what you'll find in our Chumash. And as a matter of fact, I looked in our Chumash, and there's not much comment. I have it here in front of me, actually, Genesis 14, and it says on this passage about Malki Tzedek. Let me go right there to chapter 14. And when on Malki Tzedek, it says, wait a minute. It is not clear who Malki Tzedek is. This is below the line. The name may be taken to mean righteous king, prompting the Midrash to suggest that the king that living in Salem, parentheses Jerusalem, inspired him to be a righteous ruler. Soloveitchik sees him as having been impressed not only by Abraham's lofty ideals, but by his willingness to fight for them. The commentary Orach Chaim sets the generosity of Malki Tzedek in contrast to the cunning greed of the king of Sodom. In any event, it appears to be somewhat of a corrupted text because this guy is sort of inserted here in the midst of what appears to be, if we were to read it without those lines, it would be when he returned from defeating Chada Omer, this verse 17, and the kings with him. The king of Sodom came out to meet the valley of Shaveh in the valley of the kings. Jump down to verse 24. And the king of Sodom said to Abraham, give me the persons and take the possessions for yourself. It seems to be entirely consistent without those, but it becomes, if you know what you want the text to say, then all you have to do is find the passage that says it. Hebrews says very clearly that this is an important text.
Rabbi,
Yep.
can I ask a question? What year was Paul presenting this information?
I'll call you when I'm done.
What year was what?
What year would this have been that he presented this?
When did Abraham live? Abraham, by tradition, lived about 1500 BCE.
No, but Paul,
Paul,
yeah,
100.
Paul lives in the at the end of the first century.
okay.
Oh, Rabbi, so how does this chime with the whole idea of Jesus being a babe? You know, the Christmas story.
Jesus being what?
A babe, you know, the whole baby idea out of the Christmas story.
Oh, you don't get that from this. That's not what this passage is. This passage is the eternity of Jesus, in the same way that Melchizedek is eternal, and in the same way that Melchizedek is the king or prince of peace. So Jesus becomes the Prince of Peace.
How does
Okay.
how does Judaism deal with someone being eternal? I mean,
Well, that's not part of our theology. I mean,
but you're saying it's in here, that it says
no.
that?
I'm saying it is. Nowhere in here does it say that Melchizedek is eternal. It doesn't say anything. So because he comes out of nowhere,
Okay.
and we have no lineage of him, the assumption is made, we make a similar assumption. I'll give you an example, and that is because in the book of Kings, it never says that Elijah died.
Oh.
So according to our tradition, Elijah never died.
Mhm.
Okay? And that's why we can keep inviting Elijah to come back. Because according to the tradition that developed much later on, Elijah will be the one who will announce the arrival of the Messiah. So we invite Elijah to come at Seder because it was that time of year at Passover when we expect the Messiah to come. Please, Elijah, come now and announce the arrival of the Messiah. So that's why Elijah has a role at the Passover Seder. We open the door for Elijah. We have a cup of Elijah because Elijah never died. How do we know that Elijah never died? Because it doesn't say that he died. So, the same kinds of things that we see here, and we say, it's nonsense. We have, in our tradition, have done the same kind of thing. We read back into a text what we want the text to say. Now, let me see if I can do this other thing. I'm going to stop screen share. I'm going to now the other text that I want to highlight. Let's see if I can do cut this out. Now I want to go to a much shorter text. And that is this one. Open it up. And now, let me see, can I screen share this text? Magic, let's see. There it is. I'm a genius. Can you all see it? It says 110 of David.
Yep.
Okay, so this is Psalm 110. That's the whole thing. It's 7 lines. It's one of the shortest Psalms in the book of Psalms. There are 150 Psalms in the book of Psalms. By tradition, all of the Psalms were written by David, by King David. Of course, David didn't write the Psalms, probably never wrote any of them. We draw heavily on the book of Psalms in our prayers. And we all kinds of times that we draw on Psalms. In times of trouble, we urge people to read Psalms. When a shomer sits with a dead body from the time of burial and from the time of death until the time of burial, the shomer reads Psalms.
Yeah.
Psalms are they were taken from all kinds of different places. Some Psalms are Psalms of a great trouble, of fear. Some Psalms are triumphal. Some Psalms are, they are emotional outbursts. All these Psalms. This is again our translation of the Book of Psalms rather than a translation. And this Psalm, according to the Epistle of the Hebrews, is about Jesus. And how do we know that it's about Jesus? If you look at the bottom, first of all, you see it says the double A and says meaning of Hebrew uncertain. That's referring to verse 3. We really have no idea what this verse is all about. This is an attempt to translate it. But look here, you see it says BB. It says, or after the manner of Melchizedek. And where is that? That's right here in verse 4. So that line which says, the Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, after the manner of Melchizedek.
Mhm.
Okay. Ooh, if it's mentioning Melchizedek, we're talking about Jesus again. Except in this case, it's very likely we're not talking about a person. We're talking about the rightful king or the righteous king. Everybody with me? So she presents in the text several possibilities of what this psalm is really all about. And one of them is that it's a triumphal psalm about the inauguration of a king. Whether it's King David or another king, it is a psalm celebrating this king who will be not only and many of the, in some cases, in several cases, the king was not only the military leader, but the king also had sacerdotal duties. He was also functioned in a priestly way, even though he wasn't a Kohen. We find that King David offered sacrifices, in this psalm, we have the following: of David a psalm, le David Mizmor. So now, that first line has a lot of commentary. You see, it says, the Lord said to my Lord. What's the difference between the two lords?
Capital.
The first one's capitalized.
Yeah.
Because in Hebrew, it doesn't say the same word Lord. The first Lord has the tetragrammaton, the Hebrew name of God, Yud He Vav He. So it's God said to my Lord, Adoni. Now, Adoni can refer to almost anything. When you walk into I don't know in ancient Hebrew, but certainly in modern Hebrew, when you sit in a restaurant, your waiter will refer to you as Adoni. You know, what can I serve you? It's honorific, and not necessarily to a king. So here we have God says, Ladoni, to my Lord, sit at my right hand while I make your enemies your footstool. Wow. If in fact, as the book of Hebrews says, that this is, first of all, in the Christian Bible, both lords are capitalized. Because obviously it's God talking to Jesus. And therefore, since Jesus is also the Son of God, that also gets capitalized. Now, of course, we know that Hebrew has no capitals.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
since we don't have capitals in Hebrew, how in the world did they ever think to do such a thing, to capitalize?
because they're interpreting the text, and actually they're interpreting it not from the original Hebrew. They're translating it and interpreting it based on the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation. So this gets very confusing. Who's translating what? What are they reading into the translation? Now, sit at my right hand. Who do you have sit at your right hand? Your son, of course. Right? So this is understood clearly. The Lord said to Jesus, or to my Lord, sit at my right hand while I make your enemies your footstool. Everybody will be subservient. The Lord will stretch forth from Zion your mighty scepter, hold sway over your enemies. Your people, nobody knows what this means. Your people come forward willingly on your day of battle. Sounds perfectly coherent in English, totally incoherent in Hebrew. In majestic holiness from the womb, from the dawn, yours was the dew of youth. Actually, you can divide this psalm into two, verses 1 through 3, and then 4 through 7 is almost a repeat of ideas. The Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, a rightful king by my decree. Ooh, if that in fact refers to Jesus, which is assumed, you are a priest forever. Who else was a priest forever? Well, Melchizedek was a priest forever. And so since Jesus is a descendant of Melchizedek, of the line of the priesthood of Melchizedek, you are a priest forever, a rightful king by my decree. Now, we have in several places that what from a Jewish point of view, what's being said here? God decides, despite David's errors, that David's descendants will be the eternal king. That Saul, the kingship was removed from Saul, the first king. David becomes the next king, and the tradition is that all kings will come from David. So when it says here, the Lord has sworn and will not relent. God will not change God's mind. You are a priest forever, a rightful king of my decree. By Jewish tradition, he's referring to David. But clearly from the book of Hebrews, this is referring to Jesus. The Lord is at your right hand. He crushes kings in the days of his anger. He works judgment upon the nations, heaping up bodies, crushing heads far and wide. He drinks from the stream on his way. Therefore, he holds his head high. So all of this is now confirmation of Jesus as Lord. Anybody have any? And by the way, let's not forget this the line in 4, which is the Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, after the manner of Melchizedek, right? Which is a proper translation, and included. I mean, this is not the Christian translation of this text. This is the Jewish Publication Society translation of this text, which they include after the manner of Melchizedek is an appropriate translation. Is in this case the word Melchizedek in verse 4 a name, or is it not a name?
Oh, Rabbi, where does this fit in with the book of Ruth, who is supposed to be the mother of of David and the line.
Yeah, that's true. That Ruth becomes the ancestor of David. So Ruth comes several generations before David. This is probably written about David, but probably written long after. And the interpretation of Jesus comes even centuries later. So so we have all of that. What else did I want to say about this? So this becomes while you've probably never looked at Psalm 110. You may never have heard the name Melchizedek. In Christian tradition, this becomes is a proof text for Jesus' eternity, for Jesus being a priest, for Jesus being the Prince of Peace. All these ideas come from the connection of Genesis 14 to Psalm 110. I must tell you, this is all new stuff to me too. And I had to read this chapter a few times to try and make heads or tails out of it. So let me get rid of the screen share. Stop share. And I want to go to one other text, which I don't have. Goodness, where's the book? Here's the book. And it's the text of Jeremiah. Did I mark it here? Yes. No. So by the way, what I didn't point out in that Genesis text is the rabbis belittle Melchizedek. Why? Because in his blessing, he has two blessings there, to El Elyon, to the God on high. Because first he blesses Abram, and then he blesses God. According to the rabbis, that's backwards.
Yeah.
You bless God before you bless Abraham. So I want to shoot. I want to go to the Jeremiah text because that becomes very, very important. The Jeremiah text. Come on. I had everything prepared, and now I don't have. Because that becomes this issue of supersessionism. Let me talk a minute about supersessionism because it's something that here it is. So supersessionism was used by the church. First of all, it's a very important idea. And it means that the old covenant with Israel, God has now removed that covenant from Israel and has given it to the new Israel. Okay, who's the new Israel? New Israel are the Christians. Now, in a sense, it's this idea of supersessionism or replacement theology is something sort of natural. You know, we know about the continuing battle between Pharisees and Sadducees. The Pharisees, the Sadducees were in control of the temple, and the Pharisees were the populists. Eventually, the Pharisaic ideals win out. And what ends up happening is there are no more Sadducees. So, in a sense, there is a kind of supersessionism or replacement theology in that the Pharisees were the ones who ended up determining what Judaism was, not the Sadducees. the Sadducees disappeared. Anyone who says, I'm a Jew, I'm a Sadducean Jew, is an oxymoron. You can't be a Sadducean Jew. They don't exist. And the Pharisees went on to give us a whole rabbinic form of Judaism. Judaism would have been a lot different had the Sadducees won out. But here is a passage, I have it here, in the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah, who is Jeremiah? Jeremiah is a prophet who lived during the time of the Babylonian exile. So in 580, there's a whole long battle between the Babylonians and the Israelites. Eventually, the year 586 is the year that stands out as the year in which Nebuchadnezzar finally defeats the Israelites completely, and he takes them into exile. He takes most of them. Some he leaves in Israel, and what he does is Nebuchadnezzar takes. I mean, this was a standard strategy. If I've conquered a new area on the edge of my empire, I have to be most concerned about the edge of my empire, because those are the people who are most likely to revolt, to rebel, and I have the least possibility of defending the ends of my empire. So what was done in ancient times, not only among the Babylonians, but among others, is you take the local population that you just defeated, you move them to the center of your empire, you take locals who are loyal to you, and you move them to that area. Since they believed at that time, non-Jews believed at that time, that every piece of geography had its own god or gods, those people who were moved to the new territory had to learn from the local population how to worship the local god. This is the source of this group that we call Samaritans. Who are Samaritans? Samaritans are the people, loyal Babylonians, who were moved out to the territory, and the bulk of the Jewish community was moved to Babylon. Jeremiah went into exile with these people, with the exiles. And it's only because of prophets like Jeremiah that Jews survived. Because every time a people was conquered, they were then exiled, their temple was destroyed. The people believed that if that army defeated my army and destroyed my temple, that they superseded me. And usually these people assimilated into the local population. It was because of people like Jeremiah and Ezekiel and others that the people did not assimilate. They kept their identity, because Jeremiah kept the hope alive that they would return to their land. They would, first of all, Jeremiah gave them an explanation for why the Babylonians defeated them. And that explanation is because they were defeated because of their sins. And if they turn things around, they will go back to their land. That's the situation that Jeremiah is speaking to. So here's the text. It's Jeremiah chapter 31. The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will establish a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant I made with their ancestors on the days when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. For I will be merciful toward their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. What's Jeremiah talking about? He's talking about the reconstitution of Israel in its land after the exile. Now, read it as a new Christian. The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will establish a new covenant with the house of Israel, with the house of Judah. Not like the covenant I made with their ancestors on the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. For I will be merciful for their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. So how is this text understood? What's the new covenant? The new covenant is that which is interpreted to be what Jesus brings, and that new covenant with Jesus, since Jesus died for their sins, that new covenant is a covenant of love rather than a covenant of law. No need for circumcision, no need for dietary laws, no need for strict observance of the Sabbath, because it's a new covenant. And that becomes the basis. So this passage from Jeremiah also becomes repeated in the 8th chapter of the book of Hebrews. I think it's a pretty good proof text. If you want to read a text from one period and read it into the next period. Any questions? Any comments? How many of you are going to church next week? How many of you have just converted?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is too far afield, but did the Babylonians try to export their religion into Jerusalem?
No. The issue was, and what happens later on, not part of our text here, what happens later on is when Jews return and they want to now rebuild their temple, the Samaritans who've been worshiping this local Jewish god say, we want to participate too. And the Jews who've come back, and most of them stayed in Babylonia, but the Jews came back and said, you're not Jewish. You may be worshiping Jewish, have been trying to worship the Jewish God, but you're not Jewish. This issue became such a big issue that when you read the book of Ezra, which is the recording of the people's return, many of the men, it's mostly men who returned, many of these men had married Babylonian wives. And Ezra says, send them home. Get rid of your non-Jewish wives. It's really amazing. Ezra is attempting to establish a kind of purist Jewish renewal. And non-Jews are not welcome. They're not welcome in the temple, and they're not welcome as spouses as non-Jewish wives. They're not welcome. Later on, the Talmud, there's actually a whole interesting discussion, a little far afield, about Samaritan wine. Jews became crazy about wine, and we still to this day we're crazy about wine. Why? Because wine was used for religious purposes, and among the pagan world, it was used for pagan libations. So Jews became crazed about the idea that you may not drink wine that was made by non-Jews because it was made for the purpose of idol worship. And so you may not drink wine that was made for idol worship. Now, all of a sudden, there was a question, what about Samaritan wine? Samaritan wine was not made for the purpose of idol worship. Samaritan wine was made for the purpose of worship of the Israelite God. We don't consider them Jews, but nevertheless, so they debated and they decided, if I'm not mistaken, that Samaritan wine was okay. So the issue of kosher wine remains still this issue that wine must be produced by Jews for Jews, and that's what kosher wine is, under Jewish supervision, and that's what kosher wine is all about. Because we have there, the Orthodox will tell you we have two categories of wine. That's Yayin Yisrael, Jewish wine, and Yayin Nesach, which, I know the definition of the word Nesach, but is non-Jewish wine. Except there really is a third category of wine that the law recognizes, and that's called Stam Yenim, plain wine. Plain wine is wine that was not made for idol worship, and as a matter of fact, virtually all wine today can be considered Stam Yenim, plain wine. Priscilla, did you have a question?
Have one.
Am I on or off?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. We've had all kinds of problems with this. All right, so you've got Jeremiah and Ezra writing at about 500 at this point, 500 BC more.
Right. Jeremiah is before Ezra.
550, somewhere in there. All right. So you then have a 500-year or plus time frame between when the people return from Babylon and when supposedly Anno Domino AD begins with Jesus making this
Right.
scene. What happens in that 500-year period to these verses that you're quoting? Are they just sitting there? Is anybody giving them meaning? Has anyone thought about them as being, oh, look, this is of a new leader, a new God, a new whatever? Or are they just quietly being read and studied for what they are? And it's only after Jesus appears on the scene that they take on that meaning.
Well, Jews constantly reinterpreted what these what lines meant, and they interpreted them in terms of their own situation. Exactly how this was these particular lines were interpreted during that 500-year history period, I can't say, but different. We still have a continuing interpretation of verses. But this became when some of the early Christian writers are writing. This became a very early. This became a very important place to hang on and to say, all of this was anticipated before, and here we are, and now. That's the, this is, so were there other interpretations of this verse in those 500 years? I don't know. But, verses get interpreted still to this day. What is it that God wants of us is the big question. So here we have the whole business with all of this comes from the book of Hebrews. Although it's mentioned in other, these things are mentioned in other books as well, but that was the focus of our chapter 5, was Genesis 14, introduction of Melchizedek in these 3 verses. And then we have this very short Psalm 110, which confirms in the book of Hebrews all of these ideas that God is actually talking to Jesus in that in that psalm. The psalm is corrupt. What I mean by corrupt, I don't mean corrupt in the same way that we're talking about politics, but it's corrupt in the sense of its interpretation is the Hebrew is not clear, and it can be actually some of the words can be understood in a number of different ways. One last interesting thing that she says about Psalm 114 is she says this is a psalm of celebration of a new king. And what was done at the celebration of a new king? They blew the shofar.
Oh, yes.
All right. So one of the things she says is this may actually be this kind of ceremony may be the source of our celebration of Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
Because what are we saying on Rosh Hashanah when we blow the shofar? We talk about we talk about God as king over and over again. So Rosh Hashanah is a coronation ceremony, she suggests, and that this psalm is also perhaps a coronation ceremony. If you found this chapter clear and interesting and easy to read, my hat is off to you, because it was actually very confusing and very difficult. The next chapter, I think, is going to be more to your liking, because the title is "An Eye for an Eye and Turn the Other Cheek." So an eye for an eye, which actually comes from Hammurabi's code, which precedes the Torah. An eye for an eye was seen in Christian tradition as being as not being compassionate, as being if we have a line at one end is justice and the other end is mercy. An eye for an eye is all the way on the justice side, and turn the other cheek is way on the mercy side. So that I must say that it's a misinterpretation of an eye for an eye, or as the rabbis understood it. But that's what the next chapter is all about: is how Christianity saw Judaism as passé, and that they were creating something brand new. I am very impressed and appreciate that you all came to class today rather than watching the television. Have you been watching?
We won't learn anything new by watching the television. We know what happened.
It is a fascinating process. Any other comments about?
I had a question.
Yeah.
You said, I think you said it was Ezra, that when the Jews went back and they said, you should get rid of your wives, wasn't there conversion at that point?
Nope.
Nope.
No? Well, wasn't
Nope.
Ruth a convert? If she was
No,
David's lineage? I'm
See,
confused.
we've written that back into Ruth as well. Ruth, nowhere in the book of Ruth does it say that she converted.
Then how
She
could she
does
do
make
it?
a pledge of loyalty, right? That's the famous
Right.
line, right?
Then how can the lineage come from David? David come from Ruth if she wasn't Jewish?
Yeah, that's sort of the magic.
It's only a story.
In fact, remember, Ruth is a Moabite.
Oh, boy, yeah.
The Torah says that you must that the Moabites are such an enemy that you must not have anything to do with the Moabites. So in many ways, the whole book of Ruth is a polemic against this prohibition of having anything to do with the Moabites. Not only did Boaz marry this foreigner from this people that is verboten, but 4 generations later, our king, and then eventually the Messiah will come from this. But it doesn't, the first mention of conversion is really, as far as I know, was not until the Roman period when we're told that Jews were kicked out of Rome because they were for their zealotry in converting people. But prior to that, we don't know of conversions. That really, one was born into a people, and that's who you were. There was no changing it. It was almost like race. And the only reason the Jews that we are fanatics, that we say Judaism is not a race, is because you can opt in, you can convert. Race is not something you can convert to. Race is really something you're born into. But if you were a Moabite, you were a Moabite. If you were an Egyptian, that's who you were. The only issue was when there was intermarriage between two people, how did the people identify the offspring? Was the offspring identified by the father, or the offspring identified by the mother? In Genesis, it appears that the offspring is identified by the father.
That would only come up in inheritance, though.
No,
No, bar mitzvahs.
Who can be included in the people?
Yeah.
Who is considered one of us? So yes, inheritance is certainly important.
Bar mitzvah is a relatively new process.
But praying being counted in a minyan?
So all kinds of
process.
Who can be considered one who is inside and who isn't? We have that still today. We're still fighting about who can get an American passport, right? We're fighting now over 11 million DACA young people who came here as children, who have no identity as Mexican or any other nationality. They came here as children. They only speak English, but they can't get a passport. So the issue is that the issue of who is one of us remains a very big issue. How do you, whether it's American citizenship or whether it's Jewish identity, these are very big issues. But we have several of the men of the Torah. Many of the men marry non-Jewish women, and nowhere in the Torah does it challenge that they are not Jewish.
The children, you mean?
We do have early on that Ishmael marries a non-Jewish woman, and their parents are not happy. But Moses marries a non-Jewish woman. Joseph marries a non-Jewish woman. And nowhere does it say that Moses' kids aren't Jewish or that Joseph's kids are not Jewish. We bless our children every Friday night, our sons, by the names of Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So clearly we're assuming that Ephraim and Manasseh were Jewish. Even so, they had a non-Jewish mother. But that
So
takes
why
us-
is it an issue in Israel then?
because we're not living in biblical times, we're living in rabbinic times. So
They should read the Bible.
things, it doesn't say that if you have that we follow the father, it just doesn't come up. It's not an issue. But from rabbinic times, it was for various reasons determined that the identity of the child is the identity of the mother.
The Jewish identity,
Your Jewish identity.
the Kohanic identities
Is from
still
the
with
father.
Follows the father, right? Follows the father.
So if a
Okay.
Kohen married a non-Jewish woman, would the son be a Kohen or not?
That
Kohen
probably not.
can't marry a non-Jewish woman.
That's right. Kohen is prohibited from marrying a non-Jewish woman. So if he marries a non-Jewish woman, his child loses the connection to the priesthood, to the kahuna.
How barbaric.
All right. I think we'll stop here. So I hope you all get your somehow find a way to get your vaccine.
So do we.
Don't get me started.
Has anybody gotten the vaccine yet?
Mel
Anybody?
has, but through the VA.
Oh, and Helen
Appointment
has.
for Sunday.
Got my second one yesterday.
Oh,
But that was
good.
through the VA.
Some
So,
of the morning minyan people have gotten their vaccine because they knew the trick. Call as early as you can on Monday morning. Any other time you can't get in to get a reservation.
o'clock in the morning, you have to start Monday morning. Call
Okay.
to get into the website or call.
Well, we were lucky. We will get ours on Tuesday. But we started very early Monday morning
Where are you getting yours on Tuesday?
at the convention center.
At the convention center. Okay.
Did you
Because
call or did you go online?
We went online.
because the airport is shutting down
Because of snow.
Saturday and Sunday because of the snow.
The weather. Yeah.
Because of the what? Snow.
That's OHSU's has drive-through at the airport.
I guess.
All right.
It seems to me that the information has been very poorly disseminated. It really has been. I mean, nobody knows anything. And some of the information that we were given was incorrect. So
I have to get up early Monday morning. and
what
start.
Yeah.
can you say?
It's a phenomenal thing to try and do, but everyone stay home, be safe, wear masks,
You too.
Stay warm.
don't talk to anybody.
I
On to
Okay,
my next-
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
On to the next Zoom.